All right, we're so excited to be up here. So we decided to do something different instead of just a regular presentation. We did some skits, some reenactments of situations that have recently happened to us on various ways that you can lose a deal in 10 days. And in 10 days, meaning, you know, from the second you go under contract to the end of your inspection day. So everything here is real, has happened to either one of us. So enjoy. They're homemade videos by Kevin, our amazing executive with YPN. So the whole concept is Kevin is a realtor. He's a new realtor, or maybe even a seasoned realtor that just doesn't take his job very seriously and could use a little extra knowledge. So the whole point is we don't want to be like Kevin, okay? So the house is beautiful, and I see they've done a lot of renovations and everything looks great. I just want to make sure that everything was done with permits, because you know how that can get.
You do not need to worry about these gorgeous renovations. The renovations were done quite a few years ago, and I assure you, it has all been abueloed in.
Abuelo? What's that supposed to mean?
Abueloed, you know, it's grandfathered in. All you really need to know is we are in Hialeah, and this place is definitely selling.
So the addition is good? It's good?
It's beyond good.
Okay. All right, well, I trust you. You're my realtor, so whatever you say, let's do this.
See? I told you. Everything sells in Hialeah.
What is this?
That's a lie.
Really? What are we going to do now?
Papi Chulo will figure it out.
So I'm pretty sure you guys grasp the concept. You know, Kevin, the realtor, is showing a buyer a property in Hialeah. And, you know, there happens to be a lot of properties in this area where they do illegal additions.
These are the top 10 things you should be buying at Costco in July 2021. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the YouTube deal guy, Matt Granite. How
Kevin
is it already
popping up
July?
everywhere.
This year has flown by, at least compared to last year. I'm going to bring you inside my local Costco.
How dare you?
Who is that?
Our presentation.
10 things you should buy at Costco.
10 things you should buy at Costco.
Okay.
All right, we're ready.
So when showing basically he's working with the buyer, showing a property. The buyer's concerned that there looks like there could have been a legal addition to the property. It's also something that you can see on property records, right? Kevin decides to tell the buyer that everything will be fine because properties like this sell all the time in this area. Don't worry, we'll get it done. Then we show up to the day of the walkthrough and there's a violation on the door. This has actually happened to me. I wasn't in the same position as Kevin, but these things can happen on the day of your walkthrough. That's why it's so important to educate your buyers, to do the proper inspections, to have inspectors come and check and see, you know, does the square footage align with what's on property records and what's on the MLS? Were there any open permits? And sometimes there doesn't even have to be open permits. There could have just been no permits pulled at all for the majority of the work is done. But these are all things that you want to make sure that you look at during your inspection period. Don't overlook anything. If a property has been fully remodeled and it looks new and it's an old property, if you don't see any permits pulled, then that should be a red flag and a red alert. And then always asking for a seller's disclosure. This way it protects you in the event that something does happen, and illegal additions happen to be common. So, you know, this just goes back to looking at the property records, looking at if it's a 2-1 on property records and all of a sudden the house is a 4-3, you definitely want to check and see what's going on there. Where is the discrepancy coming from? And that's when you're representing the buyer.
Hi guys, my name is Wesley. I'm going to be giving you the seller side perspective for all of these skits going forward. When you're representing a seller, it's really important for you guys to get a seller's disclosure on every transaction. On top of that, you should know the city, the municipality where the property is located in, if it requires a reoccupancy, right? So when you walk into a house, maybe you don't know if something was done with permits or not. Maybe you can't figure everything out, and that's not your job. But you should be able to figure out whether reoccupancy is required, because that's when the city is going to come out there, check this property. And if there's no current active violations, you're very quickly going to get one and ruin your deal, right? The whole moral of the story here is how to keep your deals together or prevent these things from happening. Also, you know, there's no such thing as grandfathered in. That if there's something that was done without permits and the city doesn't know about it, that could be a violation down the road. So the way to prevent that from any issues from happening down the road is getting an as-is contract to protect you and the seller. And I'll pass it over to her.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Betty Gonzalez. Hopefully I'm not the most boring one of the three, but I think I will be. Going to the as-is contract, it's very important. I always tell my realtors, my buyers, and my sellers, the as-is contract does not consider open violations or open permits as title issues. So unless you specifically place an obligation on the seller to close any open permits or code violations, you may be putting your buyer in a position where they have to close on a property with a violation. So going back to the skit, if you represent a buyer, make sure that in paragraph 20, under additional terms, you always include language where the seller must close any open permits or code violations prior to closing. Now, going back to what Bethany was saying, just because a property doesn't have an open case, it doesn't mean that it was done to code. So that's why your inspection is so important. I personally had a situation where a buyer closed on a property. 2 weeks later, they got cited for work being done without a permit that had been done by the previous owner. In that case, unless we can prove that the seller had knowledge and concealed it from the buyer has no recourse. So again, make sure you include proper language in the as-is contract, and make sure, as they were saying, that you do a thorough inspection and you do a little bit more research than just relying on the inspector. I don't know if you have any questions regarding that. No? Yes.
If the seller discloses ahead of time that there's an open permit, the buyer can close with no problem whatsoever?
That is correct. An open permit is not a code violation, so you can either, the buyer can assume the open permit at closing, sign a hold harmless, or leave money in escrow to give the seller a chance to close it after closing. Yes.
So we must be extremely aggressive. I need you to sign this offer immediately. It's a little over asking price, but you'll probably get the house.
Okay, I could do that. I mean, I really, really want the house, but I'm a little concerned. What if it doesn't appraise? Will I get my money back?
You're gonna get your money. One way or another, you have nothing to worry about. We're getting this house.
All right, you're my realtor. I trust you. Hello? Yeah, I can talk. It's okay. What? The house didn't appraise? What did it appraise for? Oh my God, let me call my realtor right now. I'll call you back. Bye. Kevin, the house didn't appraise. I need to get my money back now. I told you I'm not paying for anything over appraised value. You need to figure this out.
You need to chill out. Everything's being fine. We're just being aggressive. You'll get your money. Hey, Beth. How you doing?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, hi. How are you?
So about that appraisal, it came in a little skeet, didn't it? Yeah. So, we're canceling and we're getting our money back. Send it over in like 3 business days?
Oh, well, listen, we don't have an appraisal contingency, and I know your client has the money to make up the difference because I saw our proof of funds. So we're not going to be canceling. Actually, I'm going to see you at the closing table. Make sure your client's ready. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so, I mean, I would say that in this market, we don't really see appraisal contingencies much, right? But at some point, we did use them with every contract because you always want to make sure that you protect your client in the event that a property doesn't appraise. Just because you're going under contract and the contract says contingent upon buyer receiving financing, that does not protect your client in the event that the property doesn't appraise, because sometimes the lenders will not send you a denial if, in fact, your client does have the funds to come and meet the value of the property outside of the appraisal. So you have to be very careful with that, and that's why you use an appraisal contingency to add that extra level of layer of protection, saying if this property does not appraise, we have the right to back out and not move forward. I always like to review comps with my buyers. Even in this market, even when we're willing to pay 20, 30K outside of appraisal, I always like to give my buyers the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. And how do we do that? We can only do that by reviewing comps. Obviously, we're not appraisers, but we are educated and we can guide our clients to say, hey, this might not appraise, this is your worst case scenario. So going over the comps in those situations are very, very important. And then just, again, when you go over those comps, educating your buyer, taking them along the process with you. I just had a deal recently that died because it didn't appraise. My client actually agreed to pay $20K outside of the appraisal, if in the event it didn't appraise. We never put it in writing. We just verbally agreed. Well, when the appraisal came back, we also found out that there was something else going on in the condo building where there was more investors versus owners, and my client had to put more money down. So on top of putting more money down and coming outside of the appraisal 20K, she couldn't make up the difference. But luckily, because we didn't have that in writing, we were able to back out of the deal and my client was able to get the deposit back. But if we would have, waived the appraisal contingency, then my client would have been subject to pay the difference in whatever she had to put down as a down payment and whatever she had to come outside of appraisal. So those additional documents and additional terms are so important.
So, couple things. In this market, if you're representing the seller, you're in pretty, how would I say this? You're in a good position. So take advantage of that. Be as clear as possible in your contracts, right? When you have 5 offers, you should be looking at each person, asking for proof of funds, right? Knowing if this person can make the difference, and then trying to get the appraisal contingency waived, or getting them to agree to pay a certain amount above appraisal in writing, right? You don't want to go to an escrow dispute where you're going to have things up in the air whether or not that clause, which it is not an appraisal contingency, applies, right? It's not a full appraisal contingency, which I'm sure Betty will go over with you guys right now. So be as clear as possible with your contracts. Ask your brokers to review the verbiage that you put in there, but you're in a very good position and you should be trying to get the strongest offer, asking for proof of funds, talking to the buyer's lender if they're getting financing in this market and you still have all those contingencies in there.
Yes, and something that I'm seeing a lot lately, and I'm sure you guys are doing it as well to make your offer stronger, is you're saying under additional terms, buyer agrees to pay over X amount of appraised value. Now, when you do that, if you represent a buyer, you have to make sure you say, but no more than purchase price. I had a buyer calling me upset at their realtor because the realtor put buyer agrees to pay $10,000 above appraised value, the property appraised at purchase price, and then the seller wanted the additional $10,000. So if you put that language, make sure you put the disclaimer at the end, but no more than the purchase price, okay? Another thing that I wanted to mention, when you put that language, if you include it that way, buyer shall pay up to $10,000 above appraised value, but no more than the purchase price, you're not obligating the seller to reduce their purchase price. You're simply saying that that's what the buyer is going to pay. If the seller doesn't accept it, the buyer can cancel. If you want to put a clause where you're obligating the seller, then what you should say is buyer and seller agree that the purchase price will be $10,000 above appraised value, but no more than the purchase price. That language obligates both parties. So you have to be very careful. There's a distinction. Again, I had a situation where the former language was used and the seller said, I don't care, I'm not selling the property. And the buyer was under the impression that the seller would be obligated to sell at that price. So it wasn't the case. So if you want to make sure you obligate the seller, put buyer and seller agree that the purchase price shall be X amount over appraised value, but no more than the purchase price. I don't know if anyone has questions regarding that. Yes? But keep in mind that your contract is always, if you have a loan contingency, your contract is contingent already on a certain loan amount, right? Right, you can agree, the lender's always gonna lend you based on appraised value. He's gonna lend you 80%, 90%. But you as a buyer can say, okay, lender, lend me this amount, but I'm gonna put out of pocket an additional $10,000. Well, that's what they were saying earlier, right? So if you do have the additional funding and the lender is lending you a specific percentage, you may not necessarily be able to get out of the contract because you may still qualify for the specific loan amount that you want. Right. What I would do if you represent because an appraisal contingency nowadays, sellers are not going to go for that, right? So what I would do definitely is adding that language where you say my buyer will pay an additional, just to limit the risk for your buyer and also show the seller that you have a strong offer. Right, so if you're gonna use that additional language, you wouldn't put an appraisal contingency, right? You wouldn't use an appraisal contingency. And the reason why that is being done nowadays is because you wanna make your offer stronger. It depends on the financing amount that you're getting. So if you're financing a small amount, if you're financing only 60% of the purchase price, even if the property under appraises, your lender will probably still be able to lend you the 60%. So it wouldn't fall under a loan denial. So yeah, if you're doing FHA, if you're doing conventional, you're correct. You're not gonna qualify for the conventional because the property didn't appraise at purchase. Yeah.
I can't believe we did it! They accepted our offer over 30 other offers. I cannot believe it. That love letter you wrote did the trick for sure. All we gotta do now is financing. We are so close to closing this deal.
Sounds great.
Oh, hell no! Release and cancellation? I gotta make a freaking call.
Hello?
Release and cancellation? You have some nerve. You have to explain yourself right now. This is my deal.
Oh, hi, Kevin. Yes, I see you got my email. Okay, well, yes. Basically, that means that you never delivered the loan approval in time. So the seller has the right to cancel, and they received an offer that was much higher. So I'm so sorry, so unfortunate for your buyer, but we're going to be canceling and going with the other offer. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry there's nothing I can do, but sorry. That's it. We're canceling. Bye. So the importance of respecting your timelines and knowing your timelines when you go under contract, it's really important to know these days and make sure you're delivering everything according to the date. So as you know, if you're purchasing with financing, you have a certain amount of days where you need to provide a loan commitment to the seller or a simple reply email to the seller letting them know that the loan has been approved. There is a 3-day window that if you do not provide that information to the seller, that they're able to cancel the contract. And sometimes most of the time people do want to move forward. So, they may not cancel the contract, but in a market, especially like this, where people are getting thrown offers left and right, you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to honor these timelines so that you don't lose out for your buyer, right? Because your buyers are trusting you to make sure that they're doing everything they need. They're not the ones that are, educated on these timelines. It's us.
So, like I said, if you're a seller in this market, you're doing great. This is something that as a seller's agent, you should have in your back pocket, right? You have a bunch of offers. If you have any feeling that these buyers aren't going to come through or you get higher offers or better offers, This is one of the only clauses in the contract that the seller could basically walk out and the buyer has very little to no recourse. I know plenty of agents who have lost deals because they don't know their timelines and they get a cancellation from a seller because the seller changed their mind. And in this market, what's happening a lot? Sellers need to find another place to go. Is it very easy for them to do that? No, so this is their chance. If you slip up as a buyer's agent, that seller could cancel this contract and you have very little that you could do about it. I have a client that, not a client, a realtor in my office that had a listing. The buyer basically back and forth, they went under contract. The loan commitment period expired. They sent the loan commitment after the loan commitment period expired. So they actually sent the loan commitment, but because that 3-day window was enacted, they still were able to cancel that contract and the buyers could do nothing about it. So please be aware of your timelines, your contracts, and know what you're getting yourselves into when you guys get under contract.
Yes, and that's a really good point. I've seen that happen in the last few weeks very often. So nowadays, with the new contract, you don't have to deliver a loan commitment. A simple email to the listing agent side or to the seller side saying, I just wanted to let you know that the loan has been approved is sufficient. Something that I wanted to mention is the contracts usually have only a 5-day window for buyers to apply for a loan. If your buyer is not very organized, make sure you get more days for your buyer to apply, because applying for a loan is not just calling the lender and sending them the contract. Applying for the loan is actually submitting a 1003, a loan application. And if your buyer tries to cancel in the future for lack of loan approval, the seller can go back and ask for proof that they applied on time. So just make sure you are focused on the deadlines and that your clients are attentive to them as well.
So this is the listing agreement. I give it to all of my clients. All I need you to do is sign when you're ready. I'm sure you got a ton of other interviews. Oh, you're actually picking up that pen. Go on.
Yeah, you came highly recommended from my friend Catherine, so, I'm ready to sell.
Oh, Kat, didn't expect that. Well, I can't tell you how much this means to me. I've never had a listing this big before. I won't let you down. All I need is the seller's disclosure, and we'll talk soon, right?
Yeah, I'll get that over to you when I can. You sure you got this?
Okay, so I did it. Here is the very first offer on your listing.
Great, awesome. How much?
Yeah, so it's actually over asking price, which is fantastic. And interestingly enough, it's your neighbors purchasing the property.
Oh, no, the ones that were here a couple of days ago? No, I don't want to sell to them. We need to get somebody else.
I mean, if they were at your house, you should have told them to leave then. I don't understand what this has to do with anything. You need to sign this contract. It's very good.
It has to do with my personal, it was so hard for me. They know all about my divorce. They know the cops were here. It was just so ugly and nasty. I don't want to have to go back to that part of my life.
Well, I understand it was a very tough time in your life, but I really just don't understand what this has to do with the house. And this is a fantastic offer. Maybe you should look on the next page.
I mean, it's not the money. It was just so bad. It was so.
But what does this have to do with the house?
There was a little fire.
A fire?
It wasn't, they just know, I got kicked out of the house and my husband got all my stuff and my nice bags and stuff and threw it on my bed and set it on fire. But nothing happened to the house. It was just embarrassing. I'm just so embarrassed.
Okay, now that I know this, if there was no damage, correct?
No damage to the house.
And you're ready to close.
Yeah.
Sign the papers.
But
Sign. I'm really sorry. I did not mean to get that aggressive there. This is a very aggressive industry, but I assure you, everything's going to be fine. You need the money. Sign the agreement.
okay, if you think everything's gonna be fine.
It'll be just fine.
So yeah, how does it look up there?
look? How does my face look? I was just in the attic with the inspector and there was fire damage everywhere.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? There's soot in every single spot of that attic. We can't sell this house. Is this why you didn't send me this seller's disclosure?
Kevin needs an Emmy, okay? Hashtag, now you know, like broke agent. Now we can just hashtag don't be like Kevin when we see things on Instagram. Okay, so this is a perfect example of why you want to receive a seller's disclosure immediately upon getting a listing. Because, you know, in this situation, right, the buyers actually lived across the street. So they probably knew everything that happened to the house. The police were there. This incident actually made the news and the paper. So the buyer knew what to expect, and that's why they requested the seller's disclosure. The realtor was supposed to get it, never got it, and then we end up on the day of inspection realizing that half of the house was burnt and fire damage. And of course, the seller didn't want to say anything at all. So what do? We always ask for a seller's disclosure when representing our buyers because it's just another layer of protection. We can't control if the seller is going to lie or not disclose certain things, but that piece of paper is going to ensure that we protect ourselves when we go into a transaction. And in the event we do find something after the fact, we can, get recourse on our situation and tell the seller, hey, we asked you for a seller's disclosure. You denied knowing anything about this property, but clearly this is something that everybody knew about. So that's why you always, always, always want to ask for a seller's disclosure when representing your buyer.
Okay, so confession, that really happened to me. It didn't happen just like that. So we changed the story to condense it for here. I actually did get a seller's disclosure. And that's probably the only reason I didn't get sued, right? So it was I got this client referred from one of my wealthiest clients, and I'm like taking it on, great seller. And she was like related to like one of the mayors or something, right? And I got stuck in this mess. And on like the neighbor, she didn't accept the neighbor's offer. And I didn't know why, right? But then I keep on asking her for a seller's disclosure. She doesn't give it to me. And then on the second offer that comes through, I'm like, what's going on? Like, she's not accepting offers. It was another person who happened to know her. She finally disclosed that she had a really bad divorce and there was a fire. She said nothing happened to the house at all, and it was all a lie. I would not let her sign a contract. I said, I'm not going to move forward unless you give me a seller's disclosure. I got my seller's disclosure, and that's what probably kept me out of trouble. So that's a great story for you guys to always get your seller's disclosures. It's extremely, extremely important. Do you have a question? Huh? We closed. Yeah, and the people ended up like literally finding out about the fire. I had a seller's disclosure. I told her, you need to disclose everything you know. She ended up giving an $80,000 credit because of it. But at least I got my seller's disclosure and I didn't get in trouble.
So I always get asked, do sellers have to give a seller's disclosure? So legally speaking, contractually, they do not, but they do have a duty to disclose anything that they know about the property. So it is very important, like they were saying, that you have your seller disclose anything about the property. Even if they know that work was done without a permit, they need to disclose it because a buyer can find out after closing and they can come back because there was a misrepresentation in that seller disclosure. Yes. Well, if they didn't reside in the property and they have no knowledge, then there's a section in the seller's disclosure and they can put, do not know. But there's also a section where you can write, seller has never occupied the property. And that would be a good disclaimer to give to the buyer.
Yeah, so Kevin, I'm here and I'm, finishing up my last days at the house. We're packing up the last stuff. But before I move my bed and the rest of the stuff, I really want to make sure everything's good and this deal's going to close. We've gotten rid of all those contingencies. Let me know what's going on.
Wes, everything's fine. The contingencies are removed. We have a cash offer on your condo. Everything's going to go through. I don't understand why you're so worried, okay? Tranquilo. Ciao.
All right, it's closing day. Are you ready to close? Not really. I'm actually really upset. I just saw that there was a unit that came on the market exactly like mine for $50K less. Wouldn't you be upset?
I totally can understand.
It's not the same condo.
Well, whatever. I mean, is there...
Let me take a look. Quick question for you. Have you ever signed the condo docs?
Signed condo. I doubt it. I don't even know what that is.
They're in there.
Did you ever
It's
sign-
there.
Just relax. No. I don't think I've ever received anything like condo docs or anything like that.
Well, in that case, it's your lucky day. We don't have to close today.
No, you guys have to close.
Well, you never gave me condo docs. I never signed any condo docs. And if this is my out, I'm taking it.
No! It's there, I
Sorry.
demand.
I think we need to go celebrate.
Let's go.
Bye.
Good luck.
You have got to be me.
I mean, has this happened to anybody? It's happened to her. Have anybody backed out, a buyer backed out because they haven't received condo docs? I mean, again, so it's actually happening out there, right? So that's the importance of making sure that once the condo docs are delivered, you also get a written receipt. You know, all of these extra little layers of protection that you can protect your clients. In this case, the buyer found out the day of closing that the same exact unit underneath them was going for $50K less. I mean, usually you can't get back out on the day of closing for things like that, but because they didn't receive the condo docs, they were able to walk away and get out of the deal.
Yeah, so another one that happened to me. I learned through experience, clearly. So I was representing my developer partner that I was working with. He had a new development. This was during the recession, right? So during the crash, everything was sold. And every single buyer was looking, how can they get out of contracts, right? So at a closing table, an attorney figured out that they never got the condo docs. They were there to close a condo for, let's say, $400,000, and it was worth $200 at that point. They figured it out, they got up, left, and my client lost a ton of money because they never turned in the condo docs. Yes, does this happen a lot? No, because buyers aren't really aware of it. If you're a good realtor and you're representing a buyer and you have somebody that needs to get out of a contract, that's a great contingency to keep in your back pocket on the buyer side. On the seller side, you need to remove this contingency as soon as possible. I'm telling you now, based on everything that's happened with that Surfside condo, people are going to be more aware of condos and people are going to be asking more questions. So deliver the documents up front so you don't lose your deal at the last minute, especially with everything that's going on, and there's probably going to be more special assessments and issues down the road.
So yeah, she's completely correct in what she's saying. So if it's a private seller, after they deliver the condo docs, the buyer has 3 days to cancel the contract. So that can run all the way through closing. If it's a developer, it's 15 days. And by the way, the condo writer lists the documents that you have to deliver. It's not just the declaration of condominium that you pull online and you email to the buyer. It has to be the financials, the frequently asked questions. It's a series of documents. Most associations have them available to the seller as a resale package. And it costs maybe $100. You get it from the association, you give that to the buyer. From a buyer's perspective, it's very important because it lets you know if there's any lease restrictions, if there are any special assessments, what the association budget looks like. Now, as far as the condo writer itself is concerned, if you represent a seller, make sure you call the association yourself and you get the exact maintenance amount and you get verbal and written confirmation that there are no special assessments approved. If there are, and you don't disclose them in the condo writer, your seller's gonna have to pay them in full at closing, even if they're payable in monthly installments. Also, if there's a discrepancy in the monthly association amount that you put in the contract, that can be a reason for cancellation at closing. I see that a lot with sellers that have investment properties. They give you an estimate, you write it in the condo writer. If that's not accurate, the buyer can use that to cancel the contract. So just be careful with the condo writers. And if I were the listing agent, I would take it upon myself to independently verify that information.
Yeah, hey, Kevin. Hey, so we're getting everything ready over here, and I just wanted to remind you, we're gonna be taking the chandelier in the dining room and the living room. Just wanted to make sure you remembered, we put that on the listing agreement. They're family heirlooms, and we need to make sure that, there's not gonna be any issues with that.
Oh yeah, those chandeliers. It's actually not in the contract, but you know what? I get it. You like them. I think it's weird, but just make sure that you replace them with something, and just try to make it look nice and bougie.
Great, thanks.
So it's the day of the walkthrough. Are you excited?
I'm so excited. This is like a dream come true.
And this house is all yours.
I know. You know what? The reason why I picked this house, honestly, I just fell in love with the chandelier. It reminds me of one that I grew up with. So that was really what did it for me. So let's go. I'm ready.
Okay, well, great. I just want to let you know we actually gave it a few upgrades. I can't believe you remember it. I can't wait for you to see it after you, my dear.
Yeah, of course I remember it. It's why I chose this house. I'm so excited. What is that? Kevin, that's not the chandelier. I told you, I only picked this house because of the chandelier.
Yeah, I know you said about your childhood, but think about all the memories.
No, you better call that seller. Get me that chandelier back, or I'm not buying this house.
I guess I'll make a call. Over a chandelier, really?
Seriously. I mean, this has happened to me. I think this has happened to everybody. Washer and dryers. I mean, switching out appliances. It is so important to document certain things. We're supposed to put, what the property includes. Washer, dryer, stainless steel. I've had a property when we got to the walkthrough, they took out all the stainless steel appliances and replaced them with ugly white appliances. Like, that's not noticeable. In this case, it was a very special chandelier. And I don't know if anybody has recently read Big Money Energy with Ryan Serhant. He even talks about like this $45 million Hamptons house was basically the sale was all depending on a blanket that the seller wanted to take that the buyer would not allow him to take because he did not exclude it from the contract because the house came fully furnished. So something as simple as a blanket can tie up a deal, something as simple as a chandelier. So I took a contract class with an attorney and they said, take pictures of everything that you think could, that you're gonna go through in the walkthrough to make sure if you see these really beautiful chandeliers, take pictures of them, take pictures of what's supposed to stay in the property, document it on the contract, and then bring that information with you on the day of the walkthrough and then verify and make sure if everything is still there. Even more so when you're purchasing something that, comes fully furnished.
So I'm sure this has happened to everybody, and if it hasn't happened, it's going to happen at some point the longer you practice. You need to be clear with your sellers up front, right? You guys practice this every day. They might sell 1 or 2 homes in their lifetime. They don't understand sometimes that chandelier that they put in that house doesn't go with them and it conveys with the property. So when you're doing your listing presentation, sit with them and ask them, is there anything particular that you plan on taking? Explain to them what is to stay with the property or what should stay by your contract, and if there's anything they plan on taking. Because sometimes they don't understand. I've lost deals because of chandeliers, because of sheds, because of things that should have stayed and didn't. If you're selling a furnished home, take inventory of everything that's staying, and it's the more clear things are up front, the less problems you're gonna have down the road, right? Why do people argue? Why do people end up in lawsuits? Because things are left open to interpretation, right? Is that supposed to stay or not? So you need to be extra clear when it comes to these items or anything when it comes to real estate, let's say, and that's gonna help you stay out of trouble and keep more deals together.
Yes, and just a little note, sellers have a duty to maintain the property in the same condition except wear and tear from how it was at the time of inspection. So going to the comment about chandeliers or appliances, if an appliance breaks between inspection and walkthrough, the seller will be responsible for replacing it to something similar or repairing it. So again, make sure that you go through that paragraph on the first page with the seller, and if there's anything that they want to exclude, they scratch it out in the initial, and you have the buyer's initial as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Our next guests.
If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? If I find my way home, yeah. If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me?